Welcome to Season 2, Episode 11 of Coral, Kelp, and Community. This episode is a bonus to the usual 10 episodes in a season, and it is also the extended version, and it is all completely free. It is my parting gift, as Coral, Kelp, and Community will be taking a brief hiatus as I sail from the Netherlands to Portugal, across the Atlantic, around the Caribbean, through the Panama Canal, and back up to California. And if you want to follow those adventures, you can check out my YouTube channel, Artist at Law, and the podcast for those sailing adventures, full of an awareness campaign concerning the marine environment of the places I visit. That information will be available shortly, also on my YouTube channel, Artist at Law. So this episode is with Viveka Ramel, a wonderful psychologist and professor, and we are focusing on the mental health around climate and environmental crises. I wanted to provide this entire episode for you all back in May, because that is Mental Health Awareness Month, but my mental health did not allow it. I gave myself permission for Season 2 to be posted not at the regular intervals of every other week because I was finishing my thesis paper. And it's quite appropriate for this episode because we talk about perfection holding people back and how you should still act even if it's not perfect because it's better than nothing. So, without further ado, I hope you enjoy this deep dive into the psychology of climate change with my wonderful guest, Viveka Ramel.
And then last semester I taught in different classes here and there. At Umeå University, at Lund University, Sustainability Center for Sustainability it's called, and some other sort of invited lectures here and there, and actually several engineering. It's curious, like engineers have been interested.
I think that makes perfect sense though, because they're doing so much in the world. Like they're designing
Right,
the world.
yes.
At least certain parts of it, like obviously not all of it, but like big things that we use all the time, like civil engineers, infrastructure.
Yeah, of course.
It
And
makes
the
sense.
way makes sense. And I saw how some of them we had a few engineering students in our in this class, the climate change and psychology class. And for them, the way I really heard that they picked it up was like they get so little of this. They get so little of the social sciences in their education in general, right? So then it really added and complemented their very more kind of practical orientation and studies. So then there was this whole kind of different world that opened up, and they're like, whoa. And they brought it. So I could see why it sort of stimulates. And I'm glad that it does, that they are open to it, those who are.
Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting because I feel like on the one hand, that type of thing is super valuable because you want well-rounded people, but you also need people with niche knowledge to do certain things. And so it's an interesting, like, how do you balance your education
Yeah.
well?
Yeah, so they have had a lecture. So the one others have had a lecture or two in it. So that's been there's been one also along kind of political, economical. One program in Umeå University. It was such a cool course outline, I thought. Right, they had like these different, and it all happened at the engineering university there, School of Engineering. So yeah,
Very
yeah.
cool. Yeah. It makes me think of also like landscape architecture where it's very like community and habitat based. I mean, obviously you can do it without thinking that way, but when you do it thinking that way, then the project is always a huge success because it's what the community needs and wants. And it's combined with nature in a way that creates mutually beneficial relationships.
Yeah.
Um, so sort of engineering
Yeah.
adjacent, I
Yeah.
guess, but still in
And
that
it also
realm.
has something so concrete, right? And hands-on, right? Directly interacting with nature, hands
Yeah.
in. Like the engineers, hands-on, right? Creating programs. So
Yeah.
I very much like that. And but also I like to kind of bring in some of this more um, the less concrete, but that influences us in our like inner worlds, right? And that's with us, wherever we go, and also the social environment and how that influences us, which we are very many of us are fairly blind to. Right? It's sort of the water we swim in. It's just
Yeah. Are fish aware of the water they're in? Yeah, totally. Well, and I think it's really important to have both because you can have the conceptual framework, right? And once you understand that, then you can apply it to anywhere, like any kind of hands-on thing. And sometimes it's also important to have a concrete example to really understand the
yeah,
conceptual framework.
yeah,
Like, two sides of a
absolutely,
coin.
absolutely.
Yeah. So this class, I'm really interested. You mentioned if you were to do it again, you might change the name. So it started out as Psychology and Climate Change, but you like the book you used better, the name of the book called Psychology for
Yeah,
Sustainability.
yeah.
So what why would you want to change the name? Like what is because I feel like language really primes our brains for how we're going to think about things. Because at first, when you hear psychology and climate change, you kind of start thinking, at least I do, of things like depression, But when you think of psychology for sustainability, suddenly it's more
Yeah.
alive and like,
Who?
oh,
Right.
like we're gonna think about how to do things, how to fix things, how,
Yeah,
you know
yeah.
what I
Isn't
mean?
it interesting? Yeah. And that is sort of the inner machinery. Language influences our mindsets in our inner world as well as in our. So exactly. I think that's a good case in point. And psychology for, right? It offers something.
Mhm.
And what is it it offers? What offers what does psychology bring?
Yeah. And so just tell me a little bit about the
So
class.
the
Like,
right.
was it my first thought of depression?
How to
How to
cope.
cope with the changing climate? Or was it more of like the second title that you prefer?
I think
Or
it's
both?
a little bit of both. And in a sense, I think these are the two sides of the coin. And I believe there are more than two sides, but the two, starkest. And so it came about really because I think for me, it was I wanted to engage in some way and I wanted to learn more about this material. And so I was reading and studying on my own. And then like I want to have a discussion, and I felt this is like we're right here, we're up against this is happening here and now, like, and here all the students are out partying and like, and we're not talking about it. And it just it seemed like I wanted to create a forum for opening up these discussions more. And so it exists a little here and there, but nothing really big that I came across in this little town of Lund. So I wanted to bring it more to the forefront and create a safe and a kind of courageous environment for wrestling with these questions. And Philippe had connected with the sustainability scientist Christine Wanzler, who's been in this field for a while. She really has brought mindfulness to it, and she's an architect originally, and kind of an authority in the field. And he'd helped. She's developed this inner and outer development perspectives in the field of sustainability. So we brought it to her as would she be interested in teaching in the psychology department, and she was very keen on that. And the psychology department was very keen on it here, and they really liked this interdisciplinary approach from hers, where she came from and where we came from, and so they really supported us, and they helped us create this course. And we wanted to have, as Christine has had in her classes as well, like an applied component. So not just talking about it intellectually, which is what we often do, and I really value, and the didactic part of it and the learning, but also how do we integrate this more into our personhood, like a little deeper than sort of at the top head, and into our bodies, into our communication, into our beings. And so we had this home lab or practice component of it, and which really was primarily mindfulness. So we learned to observe our inner worlds and pay attention to it with a sort of non-judgmental and open and generous perspective, and also then the communication among us, based on a sort of foundation of respect and curiosity, and then being out in nature and doing a little walks or guided meditations and visualizations. And there's a really cool research collaboration among some European universities they're called Climaginaries. So imagining the future of climate change, and narrating the future. And it's now no longer funded, but they have done so many cool things. Like, so they did one guided, like an audio walk along a coastline here, and you can apply to any coastline. And you listen to these two futures, like one where the big storm has come and it leads to destruction and despair and internal strife, between rich and poor, because these communities have gone in this direction, and they've not figured out a way of collaborating. So when the big storm comes, it really collapses. That's one. So you walk along this coast with the water, and we know this coast is going to, like many coasts, it's very flat, and so become more and more inundated. Mm-hmm. And then the other version is where they have begun to collaborate and figure out a way of tackling this and building communities where most people's needs are met, and it's not just rich and poor, and people are cared for from the church and the school and so forth. So you have the destruction is reduced. So these kinds of talks, right, like that, and they have the Carbon Ruins Museum where we have where you donate your credit cards and you donate memories from this fossil period. It's like,
wow. Oh my God. I'm so excited about so many things you just said. I mean, especially the fact that there was a class that engaged their students in mindfulness on a regular basis and took them outside. That's it. I never got that in my education, except for when I literally took a psychology class and our homework was to meditate, but we didn't do it in class, right? It was outside of class. And then unless you're taking a field course of some kind, when do you get to just go outside and be mindful? Oh my God.
Yeah.
Love that. And I'm really excited about the it's going to take me a minute before I can say this. Imaginaries
is what it. Yeah.
Climaginary. Yeah, no, that's so fantastic. I mean, I think it's so great. And it's interesting. I've been using the word imagination a lot since I I presented at a radical imagination conference that was environmental focused, and it was one of the most exciting things for me because it was just like what you described. It was about imagining the future you want and how important that is to actually having a better future, because if you can't imagine it, you can't take any action towards it. It'll never happen. And that's so important. And it's good to imagine multiple scenarios too.
This research collaboration is no longer funded, but I think they were so clever, and they brought in literature, and they brought in education and pedagogy, and the people here at Lund University are actually political scientists who ran this. And they just were very creative, and they tried to come up with something applied, right? So they also had sound exhibits where, like, we imagine it from a sound perspective, universe and future. I actually didn't go to that one, but they had. This is kind of concretized, right? This what some people call, this is not a technological problem at this point. It is a lack of imagination. Right? And
I keep saying
you
that in
do?
class. Oh my God. Yeah. Like when we're discussing like the law or like this policy or that, or like how things are working, and it's just this very narrow-minded Western perspective of capitalism and the, false choice of environment or economy. And it's all about
Right.
extraction. And it's so hard for like, the drafters of law to come up with something else. And I'm always like, lack of imagination, you guys. Like what about this? What about that? What about the other
Yes.
thing?
And that's why
And
you are needed so much, Tara, because you are an artist at law.
right, that is my handle. Yeah, I mean that's something that I love too. Like, I mean, you mentioned that your class is interdisciplinary, and that is just so required. Like, we have to have interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary work to address our transdisciplinary
Exactly,
problems. Like,
exactly. Oh, yes, exactly. Because who can? No one can do this alone. So this is where the whole collaborative, pro-social, um, mindset is needed, and where humility is needed, and where actually the fun begins. And that's what I've felt so much, because I've gone in these different areas now of disciplines, and I'm like, I'm bringing my little perspective, and I'm learning about these different fields, and I get so excited, and it's so fun and creative, and there's so much to learn
mhm.
from each other. And at the end of our class, we had 5 invited guests from different segments of society, and one an urban architect or city planner, more or less, and a city, someone who works in the kind of government in Malmö, the town nearby, and he's trained as a sustainability scientist, and he actually was part of this Climaginary group, and he is now responsible for green and blue areas of the city, right? So he's very much an environmentalist, and then we had a woman who's built part of the Lund University, who's like a kind of a business entrepreneur, but she's creating this big new director of a big new science center. And so we asked all of them, and then a culture worker, right, to answer 5 questions of kind of from inner to outer development in sustainability, both of how they work and how they bring in the internal components of change and to the kind of collective and systemic. And these were 5 questions that the students had to answer in an area of their choice. Right? They picked an area that they thought almost any area can apply to sustainability, right? And then they created wrote an essay and did a little presentation on from this framework. And so it was so neat that day when you had those 5 people presenting. It was beautiful learning from all of us. We were so inspired.
That makes me so
Yeah.
happy. Oh man, I want so badly for there to be more um classes like this, because unless you have someone like you putting together a class, um the curriculum either, doesn't really talk about climate change because it's such a rapidly changing field, um and it can be hard to make curriculum about it. Uh, um or like it's just the
Yeah.
doomsday narrative, uh or like or you have nothing from school. Maybe you're not in school and you're just looking at news, which
Which is
is
pretty much doomsday. Yeah.
which is
Yes.
still, yeah, just like it's over.
No, it is. And I
Um,
actually had two senior journalists who reached out to me. They are like in the Swedish national public broadcasting, one in radio, one in TV, and one they have been in this field for 30, 40 years. There's one is actually retired, but has been a leader and program developer. And we had and our field is based on doom and I got you know, like kind of questions to trip, you know, and like I'm critical kind of thinking and correcting, right? This, and so, and also, and of course, it's sensationalism and like how we want to build more of a positive journalism, and that is encouraging and supportive. And so this is one area where they was in climate, and I just had a 2-hour brainstorming, right, with them, and there's actually a movement in journalism toward this.
oh my God, I'm so excited.
Yeah, so I don't know that I have a constructive journalism or something like that it's called, because clearly it's a problem in journalism too. Um,
Well, it is. I mean, there's the age-old adage of if it bleeds,
yeah,
it
oh, right,
leads,
right.
you know? Like that's not the good happy news. That's not like what gets people motivated to get off the couch or like, you know, be part of their community. And I mean, I've seen it. I've seen some like influencers on social media. They're trying to do that. Like they're trying to share, you know, good environmental news, whatever the subtopic, like oceans or
Yeah.
forests or you know whatever climate. Uh, and it's funny because I feel like sometimes I get just like slightly annoyed because I feel like you can easily go too far into just toxic
Yep.
positivity and like this thing is great without critiquing it at all. Like everyone was super excited about the high seas treaty and I'm like, this is really not that exciting, you guys. This is just kind of more of the same with like a little more lip service towards, you know, environmental impact statements and indigenous knowledge. And I'm just like, this isn't it's still coming from the same place that gave us all these
Yes,
problems.
great. Like, look at that framing. Where is it coming from inside of us? Right? Like, what
Yeah.
is our urge here and in motivation and intention?
Yeah. And so like you find yourself being a little stuck because especially on social media, like you can't always dig into the nuance with your comments, you know? And you also like don't want to kill any joy that maybe someone is feeling and they are able to
Yes.
get off the
Yeah.
couch now. But, you know, and so there's this double-edged like I which I hope these journalists you talk about are doing where they're sharing, you know, constructive journalism to me sounds like, you know, action. We're giving you hope because there's actions you can take. Because to me, hope really is a
Yes,
verb.
exactly. Yes.
Like you're
Yes.
not, yeah.
And Joanna Macy
Um,
and Chris Johnstone would agree with you.
okay, great.
Active hope.
I'll have them on the
Yes.
podcast next.
They are, well, she's 92 or something. So, but she's a pioneer in the field and active hope. If you would be, has enormously influenced me.
Oh, yes, that's I can't believe I didn't recognize the name immediately. But as soon as you said Active Hope, I was like,
Yes,
oh, of
the work that
course.
reconnects. So this is, but I
Yeah.
think you're naming some key pieces here on. It's not about, and it's so hard to hold a range and to hold both. And I had one a well-known psychologist had on her water bottle TTAT. I might have told you, what is that? And she's like, I have to remind myself all the time. Two things are true. TTAT. And she's a very influential child psychologist on social media today. And this is hard for minds to hold multiple perspectives, right? And or binocular vision, or you have various expressions of this. And we seek certainty, right? I mean, I think that's part of the challenge, and is other complexities too. But if we only go into positivity or optimism with that's not grounded in reality, it becomes false and lame, and non-believable. And then if we also go into the kind of the other extreme of cynicism, right, without hope, it draws all the juice out of us, and that also isn't true. And the truth
Mhm.
around future is really uncertainty. That's the best I can say. And I've had debates about this or where I've kind of taken this middle path among behavioral scientists. And part, I think, of what this lands inside of ourselves is that need for certainty, but also that an avoidance of the feelings in either direction. Either we use positivity as a way of avoiding, right? And this is easy. And the like, let's not get heavy and bogged down here, because it actually does reduce your creativity. We have a positive psychology of broaden and build. It's a well-established research findings today. Positivity opens our minds and makes us more creative and associative, and it builds skills that we try. So we need that, right? But then we can become, it's not to forget about the problems and the difficulties. So it's about holding, and then going, what is it I'm not willing to feel? And so this is part of where I believe psychology can offer us some help as well, is in allowing and building our kind of inner musculature for holding discomfort.
Yeah, and I mean, I very much agree that like the two opposite ends of the spectrum are not beneficial. And in a way, they're both achieving the same thing. Like you said, it's something you don't have to feel. Um, and also it's easier because you don't have to take any action on either end of the spectrum. Oh, everything's going to be fine. The scientists will sort it out. I don't have to put in any work.
Right.
Right? I don't have to be part of the solution. I can just keep living my life. Or the other end, it's doomed. It doesn't matter what I do, so I'm just going to not do any work and do whatever I want, right? Like either way, it's the same
Yep.
outcome. But being in the middle, it's just like you can't quite put the middle on a comment on social media because it's more nuanced than that. You don't have enough characters. You have to be like, okay, two things are
Yes.
true.
Okay. Exactly. And
Like, two things are
and you
true.
have various people in the field who because the scientists have done their work and are doing their work, in my opinion, like the data is there, right? So how come we don't act? How come it's so hard? And it's because it's so the biggest challenge we probably have faced as a humanity that we're conscious of. Right? But so moving toward consciously evolving a world that works for all is difficult, yes.
Yes.
Like,
Yes.
it's
So
difficult. It's
difficult.
difficult. So in that process, we easily give up. We drop any attempts. Why me? Little me. I mean, we have all kinds of rationalizations and justifications, and that's also where the cognitive psychology comes in. We have cognitive biases, loss aversion. We know that, for instance, the gain I feel from a reward, or the positivity I feel from a reward, is only about half as strong as the loss or the pain I feel from a loss. This is Kahneman's research.
I read that somewhere too. Like if you find, $20 on the street and then you lose $20, like you feel the loss harder than the happiness of finding it. And I'm like, what is wrong
Exactly.
with
Isn't that
people?
something? And it's actually so well proven. It's almost twice in terms of affect. It's almost double as
Yeah.
intense that pain of the loss, right? Compared to the gain.
Yeah, and it's like, and you're not even out
No.
anything, right? Like you're not, you're back to where you started. It's not like you're at an actual loss of $20. You found it and then you lost it,
Yeah.
and like it's no, yeah.
No, so we need some,
Oh,
but I think this is where people in communication and social scientists and other like can add. Like how do we, so we need to bring some, I think positivity tends to, for many people, encourage more, right? And we need some of that in there. I mean, but not in a blind way. But we can also like
yeah.
easier solutions that like just putting in like what's the environmental cost on this item I buy, 10 years from now. Like this perspective taking with time is so hard for our minds. We need some concrete data there. Okay, so what's the one part is just the cost of producing this and that pure kind of monetary value, but the other one is an environmental value. And how do we make that? How do we concretize that? How do we help our minds?
Yeah. Um, one more, a slightly larger than the individual purchase, but the something else that I think, and you can tell me if this is accurate. I think it is based on my own experience, but I read somewhere that people are happier and they have a stronger sense of feeling like they belong when they're engaged in their community in beneficial ways.
Indeed.
Yeah, and so like there's so many it makes perfect sense, honestly, especially as, being a very social creature, and like evolutionarily humans would not have survived individually, and we still don't. Even if we live extremely solitary lives, like we're still using the public roads, and we're still doing, things in public, all these things that we've created together, buying food someone else grew. And so like there's so many different ways that you can make an impact on the environment, and local impacts really do matter. And I think when you're faced with something like climate change, it's really easy to forget that, because you're like, oh, what does it matter if I start a
Yeah.
community garden? Or like, what does it matter if I help arrange a carpool because we don't have good public transit? What does it matter if I fight for good public transit?
Yes. Yeah.
Like, and you can see like there's oh, I forget what they're called, but there's like this coalition of city mayors from all over the world that they like gather every
Hmm.
year, every so often. I'm really blanking. I read about them a
Uh-huh.
long time ago, but like they gather and they discuss like how their cities can become greener. I know that like San Francisco and New York were part of it when I read. I'm sure Seattle,
Mm.
Paris, and like, making these changes, like painting rooftops
Yeah.
white because it reflects the sun. Like it all adds up, and having like neighborhood gardens, and like, I mean, you think, oh, it's just a neighborhood garden. I'm like, okay, so it's a carbon sink if you're doing it right with
Mm.
the soil. It's providing food security that people, the food isn't shipped. The food isn't
Yeah.
refrigerated while it's being shipped. Like
Yes.
I like we need more diagrams that are like your local things matter at the community scale. Like it's so
Indeed. Oh,
multiplied.
yes. Yes.
Um,
It's such,
yeah. And then like you're fighting climate change and you're
and
feeling
you build
good.
community, right? In that process, if it's a community garden. And so,
Yeah.
right. And you might teach.
And y'all are more resilient, and like kids have stuff to
Yeah.
do after school, if you get them involved. And like if something goes wrong, like a pandemic, and the supply chains are all messed up, guess what? You still have fresh produce, and that's
Isn't
pretty
it?
awesome.
Right. Exactly.
You
Exactly. So
know?
you also have you build in protection and you build in, and if you have a diverse
Mhm.
garden, you build in some biodiversity and you have people who are diverse, hopefully. And so, yes, this builds resilience. Exactly. And then we think, so little me, what can I do? And yes, it sure is a drop, right, in the water.
Yeah.
And we need the systemic changes. But right, there's no question, and you're here for that. And I also don't want to dismiss the engagement and the motivation that individuals can offer, and especially when you begin to broaden it, right? Because we are all consumers, right? Most of us are part in various organizations at work, in our community, and we can do little contributions there. We are investors. We are role models, right? And what we do influences, whether we talk about it or whether we like try to influence others or not, right? And so it's like, if I don't start there, where? That's kind of how it comes from me. And moreover, we know that politicians blame the voters for not asking for these changes, right? And the voters say the politicians don't do anything. They are supposed to make these changes. I agree, they are. But they need some help from the grassroots to, right, support these changes.
Yeah, and I think something you said earlier made me think of the one of those like barriers or excuses we give ourselves. It's perfection.
Ah,
That's the thing. A lot of
mm,
people, they're afraid to speak out at any level, right? Whether it's about their individual choices or about the systemic change they want, because uh, they're not perfect.
yeah,
Right, and of course, it's impossible to be a perfect individual in a messed up system, and so people they don't wanna say anything or talk about it, be or even, like, amongst their family or friends, because 'cause they'll be like, "Well, you fly on planes sometimes, you
yeah,
can't talk," and it's like, "Dude, I have to for work," or, like, whatever, like, you're not you shouldn't wait until you're perfect to try to help make change because it's not going to happen. And we still have to function in the system that we're in. And so leading by example can also be that, like, hey, I'm not perfect and I'm doing my best, let's all do our best.
exactly. So well said. Exactly. We so need that. We so need that. And actually, I'm trying to say, I do some of these exercises of, like, around, for instance, loss aversion. What is it that's hardest for me to give up for my future children, right?
Mm.
And what is it I hold like? And there's things like, yes, I'm going to move back to California, so I will be flying, right? I will, and my mom will be flying. We have to give up on our little um, propaganda of not flying like this. And yes, I have a really hard time giving up on some um, meat-based proteins. No, my kids don't refuse as well, and I'm not going to go extreme. So we reduce, and we have to hold this a little. The other values, social values, really matter for many of us, and so we justify. And I think, this is not for anyone to say, really. Like, in the like, who I will hold up the social value there higher than environmental, in terms of flying back once a year to Europe from California, right? That's something or that I will do, and I'll have to account for that. And we are not, there's no such thing as perfectionism here. And we need to hold this in, with some sort of graciousness, really.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It
But
sometimes when I find myself caught up in like a choice that I'm gonna make and I'm like, oh God, I don't know. Sometimes you don't even know which choice is better for the environment,
yes, you don't even
right?
know. Right.
Like, you don't even know. You're just like, "Well, should I, buy this or that?" And you just don't know because you can't know. The supply chain is not transparent.
Right.
Um,
Right.
like, and labeling is a joke. See season 1, episode 9. Um, and so, like, you're literally doing the best you can with the information you have. But I
Yeah.
always tell myself, like, when I get a little bogged down and I start to struggle a little bit, and it's, like, really not worth the time because I could be doing something more productive or better or self-care or whatever. I tell myself, "Okay, I am going to leave this world better than I found it. That's all I can
Mm,
do."
yeah.
Like, maybe right now I am getting on an airplane, but I'm still gonna leave this world better than I found it, and that's my goal.
Mm, great motto. Yeah. I'm going to leave. And who knows if that will happen or not, right? Who knows if that outcome it will be, what it will be, and that's a little bit. But even if I don't know that. But even so, the journey will be worth it.
Right. And really there's no unit of measurement
No.
for that statement, right? So it's on the whole.
Yeah,
If I do my best, that's all I can do.
that's all I can do, right? That's all
Yeah.
I can do. And then, and no, we can measure it, but we can. Um, I think that there's some courage in that, and like I don't know if this will end with a reward, or a prize, or like a good outcome here, a good grade, right? I don't know,
Right.
but I
Well, I
will.
don't know when I'm gonna die, so
Yeah.
like, I could be hit by a let's hope not. I could be hit by a bus tomorrow, and I can and I'm but I'm still gonna tell myself I'm leaving this world better than I found it.
Yes, and by doing that, you also, I think, create a more meaningful life for yourself,
Mhm.
right? And so that's contagious as well. Like that,
I hope
what
so.
yeah, I hope so, and I believe so. And we know in terms of well-being and happiness, and it is offering something for others, something that is relevant and consistent with your own values, and that you broaden into a larger context. Right? You contribute into a larger context. That we know brings meaning and joy and purpose to people's lives. And actually, what is sort of the struggle that dignifies this journey. And because
Mhm.
anything we choose will be, we'll have hard things, right?
Of
and
course.
and hard components to it. So then, okay, what is worth me struggling for? Is sometimes how I think. I can say, yeah, this was worth it. Most of those choices are like any big things, any more impactful contribution will come with both the joys and the challenges. And so,
Mhm.
having anything from being in a relationship to getting an education, you can tell us about that, Tara, right? Onto your
Yeah.
third master's here, and having children or building a company. Uh,
Yeah.
I have entrepreneurs who tell me I straddle every day between despair and euphoria.
Oh my god.
Whew, that's an intense one.
Wow.
Yeah.
What a roller coaster.
What a roller coaster, right? But that can be right. That can be the path at times.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Um, so are these the conversation that we've been having? Is this the kind of stuff you would talk about in your climate class?
This would be the kind of stuff. It would be a little more structured, right? But
Well, of course.
so in that, so what we just to give you sort of the framework or the kind of components of the class, it started with the initial chapters are really about sort of our history and our where we're headed into. So a larger context for this as a behavioral problem, climate change as a behavioral problem, and from how historically we have developed our mindset and our value systems, and really bringing out sort of this dominant social paradigm, right? That we are superior, that we controlled nature,
Mhm.
that we should be able to extract most kind of, financial or economic gain, and that progress is growth. How do we measure that? Primarily economically, and this, and from Enlightenment and that period to and actually going further back, the Greeks, and also going to religious kind of and social perspectives such as white privilege, and very much Western European thinking. I'd say like this. These are the roots. So that and to what's her name, Rachel Carson, and like
Oh, yeah.
different movements and that have. So that was sort of laying some of that foundation of our thinking, our mindsets today, and how they are kind of natural based on our history, right? And then going into cognitive, behavioral, and cognitive and social psychology. And there's actually plenty of research. It was so fascinating for me to discover that. And this textbook we found is excellent, I thought, and developed by four mostly, I think, female professors in smaller universities in the United States. And they draw and they point to this whole conservation psychologist, environmental psychologist. There's a field here. And I was like blown away by all that research and all the studies that are out there. And giving examples of how both how we function, but also kind of how we try to influence. And so, yes, behavioral approaches, social approaches, cognitive, and then an emotional, affective approach, how this impacts our affective systems. And I think that part was a little could be developed in the textbook, that the affective side. So I added some stuff to that, of course, and then yeah, so we had it covered, and then we brought in this action component of learning and in community, both through reading and talking and studying, but also trying to make it a little more experiential. Like, how do we bring this into a deeper level inside of us? And I taught some tools from clinical psychology, like motivational interviewing. When we have conversations about this, how come it's so hard? We like to tell, right? We have a harder time listening. And how do we draw each other out? Understanding kind of from a curious, motivational desirability, readiness for change. There's a model around that. Many models. We brought out so many models from psychology, and the stages of change and motivation, and how we talk about this. So instead of coming top down, you ought to, you should, we try to develop it more from within and bottom up. And it's a hard thing it can be challenging, right, to create that environment. But I think that was one of the most transformational parts of the course. And that's what the students said. They actually called it transformation. We had really high ratings, and they thought this is, we got the most. We asked them to give us 3 words afterwards, like that we described them. So they gave us, they used words like that. This has really changed the course of my life and direction I'm taking, and this class, and the kind of the safety and the warmth and the curiosity it created, and for us to really try things out, so that was really encouraging and really really moving for us.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, having a good response from students is, I think, one of the hardest things to get as a professor or instructor or anything, because it's so easy to be a critic.
It's so easy. It's so easy. And yes, and not everyone loved it. And some people felt of course, we have things we have to learn in this, and need to be more explicit about all those exercises we had people do. And there's learning in this, no doubt, right? But overall, I think it was and it was wonderful to hear that, and to see more than anything was at the end there, where people shared their personal projects, right? Action plans. So neat to see all different fields, from fashion to food to transportation, how they applied kind of this framework and what steps they could take to create some influence.
So you had really like a variety of majors could take this course.
Yeah, it was open. It was one of these, they call it at this university like a freestanding course. So it was in a semester was part-time. So it was 50% kind of time requirements. And anyone with a high school degree actually could take it. But it was in English, and the university liked that as at the undergraduate level. They need more English programs and or courses, and then you apply based on your grades. So you could have we had, what was it now, like at least 150, probably more in the end, applicants, and we took in 30.
Wow.
Yeah. So it turned out to
have been so hard to decide.
Oh, it wasn't we, as us. It was the university, right? Then it's just it's just who. Yeah, no, we could. It's just based on like your grades at that point, and or if you have like some high school equivalent. But many of these people were already in the university. They were exchange students. Some were behavioral science in the behavioral science program. psychologists, some were in business programs, some were in engineering programs. It was actually, and we had one politician who was in the municipality from Malmö, the town south of us here, and he joined us like a week later, and he is in the Green Party. So it was really neat how the diversity of the students, and they came from all over Europe, and also some and in some Asian countries, as well as South and North America. So it was really fun that way too.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
Well, especially in a class like that, you're going to get, when you have diverse students, you get so many diverse perspective, and it just really enriches the education.
so much, so much. And Tara, was something else that you said, and I like these courses on climate change. There are oftentimes, or just in ecology in general, or in the field of ecology, environmental science, they can be so heavy on the mind. Right? Like it's heavy to hold, and when you get into the science, and I have just scraped the surface, but it's like, holy shit, pardon my language, but like, what the earth, right? Are we, and what am I giving my children here? And the world, like, where are we headed into? And I mean, it can really generate terror and despair.
Mhm.
And so this is where I feel like we need to bring in some psychological skillfulness in how do we hold this together, and how do we grow in into this kind of integrating this difficult knowledge.
Yeah, I feel like that should just be required, like across the board at this point, because I mean, even if, I mean, I know firsthand what you're talking about, because originally I was like, ooh, like, do I want to major in marine biology? Do I want to do this? And it was so depressing, because it was like just the science of what is happening, and not, any of the solutions. Like, I mean, there is conservation science, which isn't always available at the undergrad level. And when I first started my education, I definitely felt there was a lack of classes that I wanted, and a lack of classes that I needed but didn't know that I needed, which, like, what you're talking about for sure.
Yeah.
But like, even if you're not focused on that, if you're not any kind of environmental major, like if you're in engineering or fashion, like, you are having an impact on climate change, and pollution, and resource extraction, and all of these things.
Right.
um and I mean, you mentioned that there was a fashion major in your class, and I'm like, yeah, like, I wonder how much they're thinking about fast fashion, because it's getting, uh I mean, it wanes and waxes in terms of popularity on social media, and of getting lambasted as this horrible thing,
Yeah.
right? And so, I mean, I wish that we could start it even earlier, because there are youth movements. Kids in high school, kids in elementary school are painfully aware of what's going on.
Yeah.
And it's a struggle, because a lot of parents don't know how to talk to their kids about these issues,
No. And I
you
don't.
know.
Yeah. And I don't blame
And
them. And
yeah, it's
I
hard.
mean, yeah, like it's so daunting.
Mhm.
And like
I mean,
my,
it's hard to talk to anyone about these issues, never mind your children, who
yeah.
you, like, desperately want to be happy and, like, grow up and enjoy life and have hope, and not, like, be a depressed 5-year-old, like, and they're going to school, and they're like, "Oh, there might not be a planet when I'm 35. Cool." Like,
Yeah.
it's a lot.
It's a
It really
lot.
is.
It's a lot. Yeah. So now it needs to. I do see that it's integrating. It's penetrating. I guess it seems to me. I'm not sure how skillfully, but it is definitely getting into the school system.
Mhm.
But it, yes, and it's how, again, kind of holding the difficult realities with some active, constructive, hopeful, and like there are ways we can work together here too. And the piece of when we bring that in, I feel like it brings out the best part of humanity. Like this is where I feel like we have lost our group, we're at a loss as a humanity. We have become so disconnected, which is kind of coming back to the root of this. I really see it as primarily a relational and behavioral problem, and of disconnection from ourselves and from others, and the land that feeds us and the water that feeds us. And so this when we do, we so protect ourselves in our egos. We're so good at that. We need that, and it also leaves us really separate and alone. So when we kind of break through some of that, and in the groups I've become involved in, that's actually one of the main things. There's one group, we just meet every month, and we all do different things. We're a group of contextual behavioral scientists, and really, when I started out, I'm like, I have to do something, and what can I do? Like that kind of almost panic, and in hearing what they were doing, and like just being part of that, and seeing that there are groups out there, there are people who are involved, and we can start in little ways. And what do I, what comes up for me? Where do I feel inspired, or a little like tickled or curious, and then holding each other and supporting each other when we dip, right? When I kind of dip, there are others who are active, and I am reminded of that then. And they can meet me in a skillful way, and I can meet them. So it brings out, the better part of humanity in this interdependence. And I feel like that's where we have a lot of growth to do,
Yeah. I feel like two things. Everything you said is largely why I started this podcast. Like it's like it's stories. It is specifically stories to inspire ocean stewards, but we are faced with climate change, and community is in the title. So I like to
Yes.
do ocean adjacent things because we must not forget how everything is connected. And but yeah, like this, for me, this is almost like a support group.
Yeah.
I get to meet with one person every so often. Obviously, it's not regular because it's scheduling. And they get to tell me about the amazing work they're doing, and I always feel like I'm on a high afterwards.
Yes.
I'm
Yes.
like someone's doing something amazing, and now I get to share it with other people, and maybe it'll inspire them to do something amazing, or to join that group, or to start their own group. That's the idea, and it's the kind of thing that I find myself more and more trying to put things out into the world that I felt I needed, especially as a young activist trying to find my place and trying to find, my people.
And oh yeah, it's so great. It's so great, Tara, to hear you doing this and to hear the podcast you have done. And I'm left inspired. So it's having that impact. It really is. And I exactly these ideas and breaking out of our little, when we get caught in our little mindset and in our that has to have a place too. But it's wonderful then to connect, and that's the nourishment. I think that can keep us moving. So it's beautiful that you're doing this, and
Thank you.
this is why we bring this out into the world in different ways, in our own individual contributions in unique ways. And I'm thinking of the water and ocean as this is about, and I was thinking how to connect more concretely and just like more some of the basics that came up for me, ideas that came up. Okay, there's like 70% of ocean on this planet, right, covering this planet, and in our bodies they're about 55 to 60% of water. I mean, we are more water than not. Our cells are about 70% water. Even our bones in our skeleton, there's like 30% water or something. We are water. and nature is water. We came from water. Evolutionarily, we developed, right? We were little creatures in water and developing into little fish,
Yeah.
right? And when we are in our mother's womb as a fetus, we look like a little fish originally, with a tail. So there's the ocean creatures and us. We are connected clearly, like, and so and it is the very, we don't survive without it, clearly, right? It's just
Yeah.
the very basic nourishment that we are all dependent on. And so just from a psychological perspective, spiritual perspective, I don't know what you want to call it, environmental perspective, there's the clear correspondence between us and water.
Yeah. Yeah. So all of this being said, when are you teaching this class again?
um, so it will be taught in the fall 2024, so after the summer. And as we are moving back to San Francisco, Philippe and I, stepped out of the role as the coordinating and running this class, but we are contributing 4 lectures or something online. Like we will record, and then we'll do also some of these interactive classes, a couple of them each. So we'll contribute from San Francisco, but because of the time change and that I couldn't hold it. And so, but yeah, but Christine Bamsler will teach it, and we've a wonderful postdoc in environmental psychology. She's here now. She's also German, actually. Both of them are. She's in the field of built and natural environments, and so her name is Marlis Wullencord, and so she will teach it with Christine. I think it's an excellent combination, and I'm so glad that it'll continue to live on, and we'll contribute from afar a little bit, and then we're also, and Philippe in particular is developing a climate course, a UC University of California wide. You might have heard of it, climate course. It's led by some phenomenal scientists at UC San Francisco and UC San Diego, and they are bringing in people from all experts in all different fields, and they're giving. It's a flipped classroom, so they're interviewing these people, and you listen to those before, and then you meet. And when you meet as a class, it'll be mostly like exercises and applied. And this targets more climate anxiety, and you have a meditation teacher and you have a scientist in each class as a teacher across is it 9 or 10 campuses? I think, yeah. So this is
a lot. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't remember how many.
I think they're going to be at least 8 campuses. They've gotten the right people together for this. So this is an amazing, big initiative that I hope when I move back, I hope to be part of contributing to and teaching in. And so they're making it kind of easy. Like it's not as academic as our course was. It's a lighter, and they're beginning with any student, but they hope to expand this to staff, professors, and so there are some encouraging movements, and I'm really excited to continue to build.
That is fantastic. I'm so glad to hear that it's expanding to California.
Yep.
Or at least some version of it.
Some version of it, yeah. And yes, it's happening, and it happens in different. And the other part we're doing, I think there is so while the heaviness and climate anxiety and climate despair, ecological grief, all of these like that is one way of meeting people, right? And young people, and we know 84% or so report high levels of climate anxiety among youth. Right? This is well documented across northern and southern hemispheres. Yeah. Now, how much of that actually impacts behavior and functioning is about half, but many people have they endorse beliefs to like 50 to 80% of I have no future. It looks really dire, and I don't want to have children. This is out there quite a bit among youth. So Good Grief, the grief networks, and this force of nature, and all these like movements among youth really important. And I think we can, through that, like we don't need to bypass the feelings. In fact, I feel like they are part of the very soil our activism can also grow from, right? And it might be the crucible through which we actually find our motivation, because emotions are there to motivate, to act, and protect us and commute and to signal. And so we need to hear them. And some of us are actually activated from that anger and despair and anxiety. Believe it or not, right?
That's impressive.
No, there is totally, like there is, I would say my mom, who's 82, when she started getting into this and she read about it, and she got so concerned for her grandchildren. And that's, and it stemmed from this, like worry, where are we going? And then she started learning, and she became part of, retired folks, activism networks, right? And started going out talking to politicians and trying to influence. And she went out demonstrating for the first time. And she's the only one pretty much among her age group. And she feels a little ashamed. It's sort of sticking out. And people, she's like, I can't talk about it too loud, right? And the people, they still want to get that. I want to go to Florida. I want to go and do my golf thing.
See, that's the perfection thing we were talking about, right?
Yes. So,
I can't be too loud because I'm not perfect.
Yep.
Be loud.
Be loud. And, or like, for her, it was like, I make it boring. I bring something hard into our dinner table or my bridge meetings. Like, so she's had a hard time navigating that social part, actually. It's grown and she's developed in it, but yeah.
So other people in her age group don't want to talk about it.
Yeah.
Interesting.
That's been her experience.
That's really interesting. I wonder, well, has she found, I mean, you made it sound like she did find.
So she found groups.
Some groups.
Yes.
Okay, good.
So she's found groups, and then some groups are very active, became too much for her. So then she pared down. Right. And so now what she's left with now is actually just a group of 3 ladies, like her age, and they read and they meet. They have a book club and they read meet every month, and they do various petitions and women for the future, grandmother future, they engage like that. But among her social network, general network, she's found that it's been hard at dinner parties to bring it. She has tried, and she doesn't totally quiet down, but she just feels like it doesn't take, and people don't really want to talk about it. And these are people who have retired at this point, had long lives, and they want to enjoy, kind of thing, right? And,
they want to relax.
They want to relax, and they want to be able to do what they want to do, and why be a Debbie Downer, that type of thing. And but she's straddling that. And at her summer party, everyone eats, Sweden is loving meat, is big here, and dairy. And she had some party, and I was there helping out, and she kind of wrecked her head, like, how can I have this and not serve meat? Right? And so she came up like, I cannot not serve meat. It doesn't work. People won't like it at all. But I'm not going to serve beef. Right? She came down to serving some pork or whatever it was.
Sure.
Right? But then at the toast, she said, okay, so here is what we serve, but next year it will be lentils.
She's like, I'm breaking you all in slowly to this.
She made a joke out of it. So
that is great.
Yeah, that's how she is. But I think among her generation, it's been hard to bring this up.
I think you can find that across generations too, because I've definitely felt like really I feel like I've been in some really uncomfortable situations where I'm just like, oh God, this isn't my event, this isn't my party, I should keep my mouth shut, even though this is absolutely horrible for the environment. I'm horrified right now, standing in the corner, trying to be polite, but also not super participate. And then you have, other things where it is this you get kind of stuck in this attempt at navigating time and place because you want it to be heard and you want it to be a meaningful conversation. Um, and sometimes you're aware that it will only be taken negatively and only be taken as criticism. And so it's almost not worth bringing it up. But at the same time, you're like, this should always be brought up,
Yes, yeah.
And yeah.
And I think
Um,
sometimes it gets, what I find and what I hear also is like people try to, it becomes a little bit of a debate or what's right, or it's a lot of blame and
People
avoidance.
take it personally.
And like and here the numbers come in, like how much are we contributing? Look at China, look at United States, like look at this, and they contribute so much, and why should we do anything? And then
Yeah.
and it becomes a debate about what's right and how much and numbers and so forth. And I'm like, that's usually not. I'm not going to convince some people who are really good with facts. They have might have all kinds of good facts, and but it doesn't really turn us, shift us, right?
Yeah, in my environmental decision making class, it was very, very clear from all of the data from decades and decades that people do not make decisions based on facts, right? There's the information deficit theory,
Yeah,
and it's like we have been debunking that since the 80s. Like you have to appeal to people's emotion and provide facts, right? And the facts are almost secondary, which is just so like I mean, like I get it, and it's also kind of mind-blowing.
yeah,
And I think it's particularly interesting to know that when we're in this time of it feels uh like we're in this era of like you should only be stating facts and be rational and logical is the only way to be, and emotions are bad and you don't think well when you're emotional and blah blah. And and I find that like clearly a sign of the patriarchy, because emotions are female, right? And you should only think logically. And I'm like, have you seen men?
yeah.
You seen how emotional they are? Besides that,
Yeah,
have
right,
you ever tried to tell a guy, no, you can't have my number? Watch him pull a 180 emotionally,
right.
from being nice to threatening your life. I mean, come on. Like, it's just,
Indeed.
um,
And would you consider anger an emotion? And who creates?
right, yeah, like there's all
Yeah,
of these things, and it's just,
right.
it seems so interesting that they're trying to take emotion out of it and like, oh, you're just a bleeding heart hippie, and that's how they discredit you
Yes.
because you do win on the emotional argument. Like everybody wants healthy food, clean water, clean air, a future for their children and grandchildren. Like that's the emotional argument. And the facts of how to get there are pretty simple and pretty easy, and we have all the solutions. We're just in a system that's favoring something else right now, and it's hard to we have to make the switch. But like all the emotion and all the logic say take a left.
Yes,
But they get discredited.
they do. And there's a real Per Espen Stoknes, I think is his name. He's a Norwegian.
I love him.
Yeah,
I read his book. What was it? What we think about when we try to not think about global warming.
exactly. And he has the D's, the 5 Ds of the doom and the denial and despair and all that. And then he has the 5 S's of the solutions. And anyway, he has a very nice framework. But he's an economist and a psychologist. And he said, like, when I put on my economics hat, it's like, this is pretty simple. You know?
It's basic
I mean,
math.
we just we tax, or we give it, we make it cost more, like gas,
Yeah.
tax it, and like put fees on, or we reward. Like,
Well, and also like if everyone's dead, they can't buy your product.
from an economics problem, it's a solution. It's very simple. We got the tools. It's very simple how we shape, right, with economic policy. How come we don't do it? And that's where he puts on the psychologist hat. Right? And this is what he outlines early on in that book. Right? This was published, I think, at least 15, if not longer, 15 years ago. So he's already there, right? And we know how to do this, and how come we don't? And that's where we need to go in a little bit to okay, how do we justify this in our thinking, cognitive mindset? How do we justify behavior? Why is it so hard? What comes up in our feelings, all the feels? And that's where it kind of gets really curious to me, because even there, it actually is a process for many of shock or avoidance and despair, into kind of being with it and allowing and tolerating, into taking action. So we can paint a little bit of an arc. It's not necessarily linear, right? It's not linear, but the feelings also have a process in them. And if we stay with them, and if we help get a little support navigating them, we'll see shifts and changes there too. Mm-hmm. And the kind of models that are out there now, the behavioral psychological model, therapy models, put action, or kind of a grieving, right? Put emotions strong there. Panu Pikkala's model is a Finnish kind of environmental theologian. Fascinating work he's done. He's really mapped this emotion field empirically, and his model is a process model of how we meet both through grief, by going into our emotions, and also distancing, because we get caught, and we need to learn to sort of, both from a healthy self-care, right, pause and get out of this mindset that can get so heavy on us and paralyzing, and also take action. So he has like this 3 domains, right? From grieving, diffusing, we call in the world I'm in, like distancing from all of these narratives and thoughts and feelings, to kind of get a little space from them, zooming out, perspective taking, to also taking action, and I believe with others.
Yeah, I think that's so critical to have those 3 realms, because like, you have to grieve, and it's okay to grieve, but like you don't want to get stuck in it, just like you were saying. And do you remember who it was that coined the term the Great Grief?
No.
I feel like I have 2 people coming to mind, and it might even be someone else.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was this author from Australia, Al.
Oh, is he the one who coined
Yes, solastalgia.
Solastalgia, yes.
Yes.
Right.
I think it's him. But I mean, the idea, and I was thinking about the grief in general before, because when you're grieving for climate issues or in any environmental issue, unlike grieving for a loved one, right? The loved one passing is acute, right? It's that one-off, and then time sort of like helps you to heal. It gives you that time to process your grieving. You can go through the 5 stages in whatever wacky nonlinear order you do.
Yeah,
and then, but with climate or environmental issues, it's not acute. You're constantly watching your loved one be murdered, like often violently and painfully, and over again, because it's this coral reef, and then it's this factory farm, and then it's this wildfire, and you're just like, oh my God, like I wasn't done grieving for this. Yeah. And so it's
exactly. Wow.
That process of zooming in and zooming out, and the perspective, and like not getting super sucked in, but feeling it when you need to feel it. Like it's just it's so much.
It's so much. And I mean, man does it. It does build resilience, but also capacity to hold this and to allow for these feelings, because they're not a threat in and of themselves. They're there to inform us about what matters. We hurt where we care, and we care where we hurt. And from that pain, we can really access purpose. So I really believe in allowing for that and to listen to it and to connect with it in our own bodies, and sometimes also with the help of others. And you're right, it happens repeatedly. It's like death by 1,000 paper cuts, but these are not paper cuts. Like,
No.
right?
No, it's like the cat of nine tails kind of cuts. Yeah. No, I think that's I love what you just said, that these feelings are there to inform us about what matters. Like we hurt where we care.
Yeah.
And I love that, because you can really find what you care about in that way, and it can give you a direction.
Exactly. A direction toward deep purpose and meaning that will fulfill you beyond any material satisfaction.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well,
And in that, like I would just in that, but that's a process of becoming fully human in a sense, right? Humble and human come from the same root of humus, the earth, right? It's a kind of grounding in ourselves and in the earth and in the water of us. And there, I feel like there's that searching and that learning about who am I really, and it's taking ourselves seriously enough to actually ask that, right? And you've done that so beautifully, Tara. You're such a manifestation of that. I'm so inspired by you in everything you do. Like you read, and not in a solipsistic way, right? But in this my little unique constellation, like this little flower, right? This little fish, whatever, this unique, what do I want to bring out there? What do I want to contribute? So that's taking our own autonomy and our own choice really seriously. And we develop competencies in some area, whether it be in law or in, as a gardener or as a educator, whatever it might be, plumber, or whatever like that. I develop a skill set, some competency, and I offer it into the community, right? And that creates relatedness and belonging. And if we have these three, like autonomy, competency, and belonging, this, according to self-determination theory, which is of intrinsic motivation, these are our psychological needs that we all, our basic needs for a fulfilling, healthy life. And I think we don't take those seriously enough. We don't learn. We go very much in through the extrinsic behavioral motivation in our society. It's hard to hold that. It's hard to educate from that. But I think as becoming an adult, we can learn to really look in and help provide us with the systems and support to grow, both our autonomy and our belonging and our competency.
I love that so much. It's so good. Okay, everyone listening has homework now. Think about your autonomy, your competency, and what was the third one?
And belonging or relatedness.
Right, yeah. That's so beautiful.
Yeah, these are the basic psychological building blocks to develop for your intrinsic motivation, right? And is to look into these, and and they change, and we have different factors influence them throughout life, but I believe everyone has that capacity or with support. And it's actually the most sustainable form of motivation. So you can even bring sustainability in there. It's the most healthy and long-lasting. It builds long-lasting motivation. It's I think of it as okay, that's the well that won't stop. right? Money and rewards and all that, like they come and go a bit, and they work a little bit short term.
Yeah.
Long-term sustainable motivation, dig into your intrinsic needs. And these sum them up. There are other ones, but I think this is sort of the easiest one.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love it so much.
Mm.
Well, I appreciate you taking so much time on this show. It's been fantastic.
Oh, thank you.
And yeah, I would love to just keep chatting,
Yeah,
but
this is,
must respect your time. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show.
thank you so much for having me, Tara. I'm so honored, and I'm so inspired by what you're doing. Really.
I, it's rare that as an artist, that you get to know that your work actually touches people. So I'm stoked that you're inspired. I hope that that like everyone else feels the same way who gets to listen.
Indeed. Thank you so much for having me on, and just keep
Yeah,
going. You got it. You just keep going, Tara.
thanks so much for coming.
Thank you.